Hello, and welcome to the SMU Video Archive. We're archive series. In this series, we interview members of the SMU community who can provide insight into the history of SMU, especially from the perspective of their time at the university. I'm Jo Faye Godbey, and today we have with us Dr. Luis Martin from the History Department of SMU.
That's right.
And we're so privileged to have you because you had a marvelous career at SMU. And as I think about it, I'd like to know if you would just share with us some of the events that took place at the university while you were there that are particularly memorable to you.
Well, there's so many things. I think in a negative side, probably the most remarkable event of my tenure at SMU was the infamous death penalty when we got in trouble because of athletics. But, you know, Jo Faye, it was a great opportunity for a good number of people in the administration, some of the trustees, the faculty, to reflect a great deal and discuss openly the role of athletics in an institution of higher learning. And I think we learned some lessons that then have been applied to make a balance between academics and athletics, and that's a good thing that happened. I was not here at the time, but I came very shortly after the opening of the Meadows Museum. And to me, being a native of Spain, obviously is a great moment in the history of the university that we ended up with one of the most magnificent collections of Spanish art outside Spain. And the director of the museum initially was Bill Jordan. There was a young scholar that came from the Art Institute at NYU, and he really put us in the map as a place where the arts were being studied, and combine not only the practicing artists that were already in the faculty, but also the perspective of art history. And in fact, one of the most memorable experience I had is one year that Bill Jordan and I decided on our own, without consulting with deans or with anybody else, to join our classes. So he was teaching the history of Spanish art, and I was doing the cultural history of Spain. So we scheduled the class at the same time in the same classroom and joined the two groups, and it was a remarkable experience. I enjoyed that.
Well, since you came from Spain, that was really a natural for you, wasn't
Absolutely,
it?
absolutely.
And I can remember hearing you lecture about the various paintings.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have done a lot of work with the dozens at the museum, and hundreds of tours of the museum with visitors to the university. And you know, the most also remarkable experience, one of the most remarkable experiences was that I was blessed to be with Willis Tay the last few years of his life. I think he was a remarkable person, certainly not a scholar, but a man with a sense of people and the need of people and an ability to relate to all kinds of constituency that was great. I mean, to be around Willie was also to be inspired to serve the university better. And when he retired, we still remained very good friends until the time he died. I used to go and visit with him almost every week. And then, you know, we have had, about 6 or 7 presidents during my tenure at the university.
Right. So. Well, you came to SMU in what year?
1968.
So you have seen a lot.
Oh, yes, yes.
And as I recall, you were the Kahn Professor of History?
Indeed. The chair in the history department that carries the name of Eddie and Luis Kong, was founded early in the 70s. I don't remember the exact year. And to me, it's a thing of great pride because Eddie was one of my students. So he got acquainted with the university through my classes. And I used to teach, and I still do, courses for adults in the evening. And it's one of the things I enjoy more.
That's a continuing education.
Continuing education and extension courses. And Eddie had taken 2 or 3 courses with me. And I had no idea who this person was. I knew him because he sat always in the front row, a little bit to my left, always taking notes, and sometimes asking very, very good questions. And one year, he called me at home and invited me to lunch. So I went to have lunch with him, and I still didn't know who he was, besides the fact that he's an adult taking courses at SMU. And during the lunch, he said that he has done quite a few things for other institutions around the country, and he would like to do something for SMU, and wanted to talk to me about it. And I said, well, what do you have in mind? And he said, well, we're thinking about endowing a chair. And I want you to tell me how much you think will cost that. And in those days, it was about $1 million. So with a great trepidation, I said, well, Eddie, it's going to cost about $1 million. And Eddie said, well, that's fine. That's what I thought that was going to cost. Let's go see Dr. Tate. And that's the way the chair was founded. And
It made a tremendous difference for you, didn't it?
I held it, yeah, from the moment of the foundation until I retire, and gave me the ability to have, resources for research, to be able to travel to different archives. And Eddie and Luis, his wife, remained very close friends until they died. So.
Well, they were a marvelous gift to this community.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know if the camera can get it, but that's the picture of Eddie, and it's taken downtown in a building where that horse is placed in the front of the building. And incidentally, that's the Trammell Crow building downtown.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And Eddie had his picture taken, as you see it right there.
Right.
And then he made about 200 or 300 postcards with that picture
Oh, really?
and sent it to everybody. There was somebody in town. And in the postcard, he wrote simply, in the postcard, there was a reproduction of this picture. And he said, Dear Luis, because he sent one to me, but he sent it to the mayor, to the members of the city council, to all the big wheels of Dallas. Everybody got the postcard.
Right.
And all of them said the same thing. Dear Luis, I have been thinking about you lately a great deal, and if you look at that postcard, you know what I think you are.
But he was pretty much of a jokester, wasn't he?
He was a remarkable human being with a great sense of humor, and very interested in education.
And he didn't attend SMU either, did he?
No. In fact, his interest was liberal arts and the humanities, although he was a businessman all his life. But he said that he believed that a grounding on the humanities and the liberal arts was essential to be successful in business. And that's why he gave us the chair on the history department.
Well, you were very much sought after as a professor, and I've told you one time, I think, that I remembered how you got up on the chair and told us that if you didn't want your children to leave you, that they shouldn't learn a foreign language. Do you still feel that way? It takes you, once you have a foreign language, you can
No, I know.
go
what you
to another
mean.
country.
No. I kept saying that learning a foreign language is taking a very serious intellectual risk, because in the process of learning the language, obviously you need to absorb a different culture, a different historical experience, and therefore challenge your own identity as a member of whatever culture of nation you are. But of course I was teasing the audience, because that's exactly what education is all about, to challenge people to become something more than what they are at a given moment.
Well, you certainly left your home and came to a foreign country by the route of Japan.
Yes.
And
But see, I came here with no intention of staying in the United States.
you didn't believe you'd be a Texan.
No. In fact, my plans were to finish my graduate degree and go back either to Japan or to Europe. Although by that time, when I came to the United States, I already had developed a great interest in Latin America. But the United States was not in the picture at all. And by my second year in the United States, I really have fallen in love with the country, the history, the culture, and here I am. Because see, I came to the United States in 1954, 55. I'm still here.
Well, and that's to our benefit.
Well, thank you.
So tell me, you mentioned that integration was, that you were here when integration took place?
Oh yeah, when my first year at SMU, this was very much a lily-white campus, upper middle class, very conservative. In fact, coming from the Northeast, SMU was shocking.
Really?
There was such a calm atmosphere. I didn't see any of the problems that I have witnessed both in Boston and then in New York at Columbia. And it really began the year after I came. I think Will Stay realized that the whole atmosphere of the country was changing, that we are moving into a new phase of American history, and the integration began. I mean, we began recruiting African Americans, recruiting Mexican Americans and Chicanos, and create the foundations of what later was used by President Pai to truly diversify the campus. And I'm telling you, I walk a great deal across the campus, going to the libraries, going to the museum. And when I look at the faces of SMU today and compare with the faces of SMU in the late 60s, this is a new ball game. And of course, requiring, I suppose, a very different approach to teaching and to inspire this very diversified community.
So did you ever feel, we had how many presidents while you were here?
Oh, I counted them once, I think about 7 or 8, counting the ad interim presidents.
Right.
After a president either left or was fired, they usually have somebody pro temp for a year and a half until the new president came on board. So counting all of them, about 7 or 8, yeah.
So considering when you came here and when you look at the university now, you're saying that the student body has changed a lot. Do you think the administration has changed a lot?
I don't know,
Or the
because I have
curriculum?
always, on purpose, kept myself away from the administration. I don't know if they have changed.
What about the curriculum?
Sometimes I don't have great hopes that administrators can change, you know. But the faculty has changed in remarkable ways, and for the better.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, today, practically in every department, you have a few that are nationally recognized scholars. This was not the case back in the 60s. So I have always say, and I mean it, Joe Fahey, I'm not teasing, the SMU of today would have not hired me. And certainly they would have not given me tenure.
Why not?
Oh, because the standard have been raised so much.
You mean the academics? Well, you had a PhD.
That's right, but PhD are so many. There are PhDs driving taxi cabs in Washington D.C. and in New York, especially in my field. No, today they are expecting, you know, that if you are not at the time that they hired you, but you shortly will be a nationally recognized scholar. And this is great because that's the way you put the university on the map. The other side of that coin is that if you are not very careful, the old close relationship that we used to have with the students, the classroom, the interaction with the students, the total dedication to teaching these kids in front of you, that may weaken if you are not careful.
You pay a price.
You pay a certain price, indeed. And then, in my opinion, and this is just a personal opinion, and I'm not passing judgment on anybody, in the restructuring of the whole administrative setup of the university, the college is practically being swallowed up by the professional schools. The majority, or if not the majority, a great number of our undergraduates are pursuing majors in the Cox School of Business, a great number in the medical school, engineering. And therefore, the sharp identity that the college had back in the 60s has totally disappeared today, okay? And I regret that.
Are you saying Dedman College, or are you saying, when
Well,
you say the college, are you just saying the
See,
university?
and that's one of my problems, and I say this with certain degree of hesitation, okay? Dedman College is not the college. Dedman College is what remains of the college that is majoring in the liberal arts and humanities, meaning those who are not already in Cox and in
Spoken for.
and metals and engineering, and then the graduate faculties of humanities and science, because that's a graduate school equal to metals or to Cox. It's a professional school, you see.
So what you're saying
And
is
now-
the core.
Yeah, what Dedman College, what today we call Dedman College, is not just the college. I wish it would have been, but it's not. It's all humanities and sciences at the graduate level. And for the effort to bring the university to a national stage, obviously the stress has been in scholarship, publication, and therefore, even within that core that you're calling the Dedman College, the tilt is towards
Toward graduate.
graduate endeavors and publications and research. I personally regret that a great deal. When I came, you probably remember that the college was divided in 2 units. The first unit composed 2 years of common education and was called University College. And University College had a totally different dean from H&S and a different budget and a curriculum that they themselves have developed with the help of the faculty. And there were much more structure of requirements in the liberal art humanities component that we have seen ever since. In fact, there are very few requirements today for all members of the college. In fact, in one of those fest of reforms that faculties get into, we came up with and you probably remember, the so-called Common Educational Experience.
Is that the same thing as the Marsh Terry report?
Yeah, well, it came out of the Marsh Terry report, I believe. And the Common Educational Experience was the effort to devise a core curriculum that everybody that entered SMU would have to take. And I wrote a letter to the editor of the Mustang magazine after they published a glowing article on the Common Educational Experience. And I simply said, and I'm going to tell you because it was published, all right? The letter said, dear editor, I have read your article on the Common Educational Experience with a great deal of interest, and I would like to say about the Common Educational Experience of SMU what the great historian said about the Holy Roman Empire. And what he said is that the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor empire. And the Common Educational Experience at SMU is neither common, not educational, nor any kind of experience to talk about. Well, the provost in the next issue wrote the letter to the editor trying
defending it?
Yeah, defending it. But no, we never recovered that total dedication to undergraduate education with a required curriculum. But Joe Fahey, we are in very good company.
That's what I
Nobody
said.
else does in the country, you see.
It's-
And to me, that's one of the great tragedies of American education today.
We've lost that.
You have kids that graduate with a bachelor's degree that have begun specializing very early, that cannot read or write or give an oral presentation that will be persuasive. They are lacking the humanistic values that one absorbs in a true undergraduate liberal arts education. And they are not to be blamed. The system is to be blamed. But if you look from the outside, and as I was saying before, and you look at the university faculty compared to some of the other major universities around the country, we have come a long way.
Much
A
be-
long way.
You'd say it's a much better school now?
Much better faculty, and
Oh, that makes the school.
hopefully much better students.
Because the faculty make the students, I mean,
Well,
and
the faculty tends to attract graduate students that will know that, to give you an example, my colleague David Weber, there's no question, he is the #1 historian in his field anywhere, not only in the United States, but in the world.
in his field.
Is Southwest history. So he does what in the old language was called the Spanish borderlands, namely the territories of the United States that became part of the United States after centuries of being part of the Spanish Empire, and after the war with Mexico in the 1840s became part of the United States. That field was developed by a professor at the University of California, Professor Bolton, And he really crafted a new field of specialization that was to look at the history of the United States not from the perspective of the Northeast and then expanding towards the Pacific, towards the West, the whole idea of the frontier, but said you need to supplement that perspective by looking at what Europeans have done in what is territory of the United States before the Mayflower arrived, because
A lot happened.
Santa Fe was already a thriving urban center.
Right.
There was a great trading route between Santa Fe and Mexico, El Paso del Norte, all the great towns along the border, Texas. San Antonio was already began as a Franciscan mission, has developed into a small but thriving urban center. And that is the perspective that Bolton wanted to look at, and a field developed, and today the number one is David Weber.
Well, that's marvelous. I would like for you to, if there's any particular thing that a president did for us in the past that you think of that was very much needed or made a difference in the way the university was going?
Well, I think President Pai, that probably was not a very popular president on the eyes of the faculty, although I think he was a remarkable, intelligent, and ethical human being. I think Ken Pai consummated the integration and the diversification of SMU, no question about it.
And how?
Well, many ways. I mean, by putting the fire on the recruiting people and the admission people to go the extra mile to look for kids that came from minority backgrounds and were qualified to enter SMU, then making a tremendous effort to find the financial aid to supplement what their families could pay, that in many cases was very little.
Is that
or
how
nothing.
the Hunt Scholars, was that about the time?
No, that's a totally different thing. But then he set up a fund that I believe is still operating to give scholarships to graduates of community colleges in the Dallas County.
Really?
Okay? And he didn't say anything but that. But he was a very sharp guy and knew that scholarships to community college, normally 80% or so of those scholarships will go to members of minority. And every year he gave, 10 or 15 scholarships to kids that have finished their associate degrees. In other words, they have 2 years of college, and brought them, to SMU to finish, and things like that, putting the pressure on the admission officers and on the recruiters, then finding money, then creating that scholarship, and then changing the atmosphere of SMU to make it much more open campus, much more receptive, and because I remember the first group of African Americans and Chicanos that came to this university in the closing years of the 60s, they were very uncomfortable here. And I don't blame them.
Very closed.
I myself was not very comfortable. After all, I was probably the only Hispanic member of the faculty in those years. In fact, I remember running into somebody, I think it was in the supermarket or in a mall, and I like to talk to people, and I began talking, and I was wearing blue jeans, and we began talking, and this gentleman, a very Anglo type, realized I have a heavy accent and I'm not from these parts, And finally, he said, where did you work? And I said, well, I've been working at SMU for several years. And he looked at me and said, oh, in which building did you work? The assumption being that I was obviously a janitor with my accent and my blue jeans. And I mean, did you work in Meadows or did you work in Deadman, Dallas Hall or what?
Which building do you
So
clean up?
there was a little bit of that. And of course, Pi always told me, and he had a great point in this, and again, this is a fact, it's not a criticism of anybody, that one of the handicaps of SMU to be able to be that kind of open, embracing, diversified university is the fact that we are located in the park cities. And the park cities is the ultimate bastion of Anglo
Purity.
purity, if you want to look at that. He had a point.
Right.
I mean, if the campus of SMU would have developed instead here, the hilltop on the other side of the Trinity River,
That would have been different.
it would have been very, very different. So, but Pi really went at this thing systematically. I mean, he has.
He did a lot for the finances of the university too, didn't he?
Well, I think so. And
Tighten
more
them up.
than anything else, Joe Fahey, and people, perhaps the faculty doesn't realize, he restored the integrity of the university after the fiasco of the death penalty. And Ken was very much in love with athletics. I mean, he really loves sport. So it never entered his mind that we will do away with a first-class athletic program. But he began restoring the integrity on how the athletic department was run, putting pressure on everybody that we are not going to cut corners, we are not going to cheat, you know, and we're going to be loyal to the standards of the university. So if a great athlete comes out of somewhere without the grade point average and the preparation that will guarantee that he can at least do fairly well at SMU, we should not consider that youngster. So I think he did a great deal on that.
I know we're talking about history, but if you were looking into the future, what would you wish for SMU?
Excuse me.
You
You
think-
know, I've thought about this many times. And I'm going to tell you exactly, I will reverse the restructuring that I was talking about before and make the college an entity standing by itself with a college faculty 100% dedicated, not just to teaching. Anybody can teach a subject. The great teachers are the ones that become mentors and educators and open the mind of young people, the ones that give them hope for the future. This has nothing to do with scholarship. It has to do with certain human qualities. So if there was only one thing that I could do, I will try to rebuild the college as a fortress that is not encroached by the faculty professional schools, by the professional schools, sucking these kids in different directions too early. And it
Right.
doesn't mean that I oppose to
Right.
an undergraduate to have a major in business.
Sure.
I don't.
But you want to make that school.
But
Superb.
they better get their foundation in the liberal arts and humanity. After all, a major, I don't know in the business school, but a major in most of the departments at Deadman require, what, 33, 36 credit hours? Well, suppose that they require even double for a major in business. That leaves you still half of their credits that they could be taking in the college. And they don't, because they get enamored of their professional thing, and you have kids in undergraduate that think they're going to become outstanding television experts. No,
No apologies.
no criticisms of anybody around here, and they're consumed by that. And you tell them, okay, read and analyze one of the great works of literature in my field, Don Quixote, or Cervantes, and they look at you and say, for what, man? For what? They don't see the pragmatic connection, okay? And indeed, there is no pragmatic connection to show, but in the long run, by doing this, you foster your imagination, your creativity. You learn to wrestle with characters in an environment described by the writer. And this is the way you learn about life.
Right, right.
And I'm afraid that it's not just because I'm getting too old, but because there is something out there that tells me that we are failing to do that.
Well, and of course, we're becoming more technically oriented all the time, which takes away from that kind of...
But see, again, that's a fact of life. Today, they have to have a certain technical ability and knowledge. But don't tell me that just technical information and technical skills in itself equal the education of a human being. I'm sorry, I can see it. In fact, I am now, as you know, for the last 10 years, working in corporate America, precisely because corporate America realizes that besides the business and the technical education, their employees need a basic human education. And what I do is practically humanities and liberal arts and
You enrich their lives.
among executives of corporations, you see. But anyhow, another thing, and this again, I'm going to show you my prejudice, if you want to call it a prejudice. I'm certainly not going to object to that. But I am very uneasy when I hear the President of the United States and then cascading down to other people in politics and people in other fields and so forth, that every American has a right to go to college or should have a right to go to college. Nobody has a right to go to college. You earn that right and you maintain it. And to think that we are going to create more and more institutions so the children that come out of high school, they are very deficient in the general education, that at times cannot even write the English language. They should go to college. But you see, we are then lowering the standards. And to me, there is a problem in a democratic society. And the problem is that, of course, we want everybody to be equal. The founding fathers never said that everybody was equal.
Equal opportunity.
They said that there are certain basic rights that everybody has equally. And we are all equal before the law. Because, Joffe, you know me, I have no claim to say, well, I want to be a mathematician. I cannot even balance my checkbook. I'm allergic to numbers.
I appreciate that.
So every kid that comes down the pipeline should go to college. But see, in a sense, we have multiplied the number of institutions to such a point that this institution cannot survive unless they bring every year a certain number in the freshman class. Okay? And the economic aspect at times blind us to what a university should be, that, I'm sorry, an intellectual elite, an academic elite. They are not everybody out there. It doesn't mean that the blue-collar person or the person that gets a technical education to do whatever, a great mechanic, they don't deserve the respect, the dignity that everybody else. And I have always said that, you know, because I have a doctorate, am I entitled to a certain respect? No. Respect has nothing to do with the title. It has to do with the person that I am. That we need to improve the economic condition of those so-called blue-collar classes. I'm agree with that. But don't tell me that all of them should have gone to college or should have been accepted so they get a bachelor's degree. I get passionate about
Well,
this.
that's impossible because people are not created equal.
They are created equal on basic.
But,
Of the basic
but their intellectual capacity is not
They don't
equal.
develop it in the same way because some people don't take the opportunity. And it's a very complicated thing because what happened with the social and environmental conditions are such that children cannot develop their God-given talents. That's a crime, and society has to pay attention to those things. But the point is that not every 17 or 18-year-old in America is ready for college or should maybe go to college at that time, maybe 10 years later. And there are a lot of adults coming back. In fact, SMU has developed a great program that is an undergraduate program for adults to finish college if they apply to SMU with a certain amount of credit that they may have taken way back then. Great.
Come back.
That the university, for instance, have developed, and this to me is the most exciting thing we have done at SMU from my perspective, open the university to professionals that are working full-time and give the opportunity to pursue a graduate degree, a master's degree in general knowledge and education, the Master of Liberal Arts. We opened that program with the late Fred Bryson and Willis Tay at the end of my first year here, early in '69, all right? If you look at the statistics, the MLA program has graduated more students since '69 than all the other graduate programs of SMU put together. And let me tell you, because people, the faculty especially, they have never been involved. They think this is a Mickey Mouse thing, you know, this is not, doesn't have the rigor of a graduate program. If I ever hear that word again, rigor, I'm going to throw up, okay? They don't realize that in those classes, are you ready for this? I have had MDs doing the Masters of Liberal Arts. And I have talked to some of them, and some of them have become my friend. What does a surgeon that gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning does in my class at 7 in the evening? And they will tell you because at this point in my life I realize I know nothing about history, literature, the arts, and that life is not 100% cutting pieces of a human body. I have had the last class I have taught last semester in the MLA, I have a judge in my class.
Oh, did you?
Lawyers I have had, but this guy is a lawyer in the family court in Denton County, and came to
All the way
SMU,
from Denton.
and he's joining the course I'm going to do this summer again.
You're still teaching in the MLA?
Oh yeah, yeah. Don't tell
Terrific.
me that we have had an impact in this community through the MLA, but swimming against the current, because when you talk about this other national recognition that is based in scholarship and publications and so forth, this doesn't count. Doesn't count at all.
But it's real life.
But counts on changing people's life and improving the quality of who we are as a nation and the quality of our citizens. And I have taught every single year that I have been at SMU.
In the MLA?
In the MLA, and since I have retired, I have kept that all through.
I didn't know you were doing that. That's
And you know, I
marvelous.
think one exciting thing that's happening right now is the development of the Legacy Campus, the SMU campus at Legacy Drive.
Oh, okay.
And it's incredible. EDS has given us 4 magnificent buildings, state-of-the-art facilities. And what I'm trying to do now is to help us to develop a legacy, a liberal arts humanities program geared to the corporate executive, so that they will be able to recharge their batteries, to open their eyes to the fact that the corporation is not just a money-making machine. It has to be that, or else nothing else will happen. But besides that, they have to be a place where people can develop themselves as people, and help them to, with programs like these, to start balancing their lives between the pressures of the job and the nurturing of the soul and of the heart. So,
Well, I think that's really looking toward the future and doing something that, I mean, that's one of the things we're worried about in our country, I think, is that people are spending so much time in front of the computer and with technical lives that they're not having that rounded out approach to education.
well, and it's part of I think, of a general lack of vision. Where are we going as a nation and as a people as we enter a new millennium? And has to be more, and we all know this, okay? It has to be more than economic development.
That's right.
And don't get me wrong, I love money. and I want to have enough of it. So I don't have to worry in my old age. But that alone will not make us a great nation and a great people.
Well, one of the things that we see in our country is that we're not paying our teachers, and we wonder why we don't have good education for our young children. And those are the values, I think, that you learn about.
But see, years ago, SMU, in the infinite wisdom of some administrator, did away with the education department.
And I understand we're going to get it back. Have you heard that?
I have heard that.
Well, we'll look forward to it.
But see, if that happens, I will bring all those who were part of doing away with it, line them up against the wall of Dallas Hall, and shoot them without mercy. I mean, that sounds terrible.
Well,
and I will not do that, Joe Fahey. But that was such
So short-sighted.
short-sighted that we, as a urban university, decided to wash our hands in the preparation of great teachers. And then, of course, we pontificate about how terrible the ISD is and how terrible our schools are and the test scores. What are you doing besides complaining? And we never, even when we had the education department, we have never poured resources there as we did in other areas.
That's true.
We did not go out of our ways to excite some of these young people about the nobility of teaching, the incredible sense of fulfillment that, thanks God, I feel that I spend most of my life helping young people to cope with the realities of their lives, you see. But we saw education as, who wants your graduates to go and teach in a grammar school somewhere? We want our graduates to be captains of industry and business and big engineers. And, well, what'd you say to those things?
Well, we're learning our lesson, I think, and it's just always marvelous to hear you talk about the things that you're interested in, and I'm glad that I was one of your students at one time in the MLA.
That's right.
And it'd be a richer world if we had a lot more professors like you.
Well, I don't know about that. I think you had to be very careful not to have too many like me, or else the institution will be totally paralyzed, you see.
Well, it's been delightful to have you here today and to hear you reminisce about some of your views and make observations about SMU's history. And we'll look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Can I say one last thing?
Yes.
As you know, and we have not had the opportunity to talk about that, that's fine. I've got many sort of awards through my life at SMU, and some of them felt impressive, like when King Juan Carlos of Spain knighted me
Oh, I remember that.
in the realm. But I want to show you the award that I treasure more than anything else that I've got in my life. And it's a little tiny plaque, but this simply said, the Willis M. Tay Award, Dr. Luis Martin, SMU Student Senate.
That's from the students.
Not only is it from the students, but it's named for the man that, in my mind, still Mr. SMU. The man that embodied the values, the goals of this university better than anybody else that I have seen.
And the spirit.
And the spirit in the last 30 years. And this Willis Tay Award granted by the Student Senate is my treasure. And I think when my time comes, I'm going to tell my children to be sure to put this with me in the coffin, so when I get to the SMU in the sky, I can show it to St. Peter
And to Willis.
and say, you better open up the door, all right? Because this is the only thing
The
I
most
think
valued thing.
means a great deal to me.
The horse?
Oh, the horse is, you are part of this because you are part of the committee. This was the very first alumni award for faculty excellence that was established in the 80s. In fact, I may have the year here. No, it doesn't say, but anyhow, the very first one was given to me by the Alumni Association.
Well, it's really beautiful.
And
I
these
love the
two, I have then the two of them in my desk at home, and every time I'm working there, I look at my little
Your
horsey
pony?
and my little plaque and say, maybe
You did some good.
you have done something in your life that
I think you've just been marvelous for the school. And I think it's time for us to close.
Well-
So we really do thank you most
It's been a pleasure.
kindly for you to give your time to do this.
I hope that the archives have a good censor and restrict access to this interview to only mature people, you know, so they don't get shocked by some of my opinions. It was great.
All right.
Thank you very much.
We're finished?